Also, as one of our moderators, is Deacon Michael Parks. Praise the Lord, Deacon Parks.
Praise the Lord.
Tonight's program is entitled simply Ask a Cop. What we hope to do tonight is to speak to many of Nashville's finest police officers to get a better understanding of policing in the community in 2021. Tonight's panelists have a wide variety of backgrounds and experience. Joining us tonight is Inspector David Imhoff, who is newly formed officer of the Alternatives Policing Program. Inspector Imhoff is responsible for creating and overseeing a co-response approach to mental health issues, juvenile diversion program, and a gun reduction program. He has held this rank of inspector since February of 2021. He has been a commander of the East Precinct for almost 10 years. Also during that time frame, he has served the city of Nashville as a police officer, a detective, hostage negotiator, sergeant, lieutenant, and captain. He holds a master's in mental health from Tribeca University, a bachelor's of arts from Hanover College in Hanover, Indiana, and he's also a volunteer for Big Brothers Big Sisters. And he was also an gubernatorial appointment for a Tennessee Second Look Commission, a state-approved program review for child abuse cases. David is also a proud father of two and lives in Mount Juliet, Tennessee. Also joining us is Commander Virginia Kerrigan. She is currently the East Precinct Commander with the Metro Police Department. She's been with the police department for 16 years. She has worked patrol division as both a sergeant and a lieutenant. Before being promoted to captain, she currently works criminal investigation division as a lieutenant over the adult sex crimes unit. She has a bachelor's of degree from the University of Lebanon, Tennessee. Cumberland University in Lebanon, Tennessee. Please forgive me. Also joining us is Lieutenant Stephen Bowers, who's a native Nashvilleian, who's been a police officer since 2004. He has worked with the department for a total of 12 years. He was recently promoted to lieutenant and currently works in the Office of Alternative Policing Strategies, where he oversees gun retrieval programs and work with group violence intervention. Also joining us tonight is Sergeant Jessica Ware. She currently serves as the community coordinator for the East Precinct. She has been with the department since 2013. Within the department, she has worked both control and community affairs and community outreach positions. She holds a bachelor's in sociology from Francis Marion University. And Sergeant Michael Sofa has been with the department since 2009. He has been a sergeant for 6 years. He is assigned to the East Precinct Patrol, and he has worked as a youth services detective investigating missing kids. And last but not least, joining us is Detective Kiara Ward Whiteley. Detective Ward Detective Ward is a native Nashvilleian, and she has been employed with the Nashville Police Department for 6 years and currently assigned to the East Precinct Investigation. Please join us in welcoming our important panelists for tonight. Thank you for joining us. We do have several questions to get to tonight. Some are prepared, some are going to be open Q&A, where our viewing audience will be able to submit questions that they would like us to ask our panelists as well. Our first question tonight has to do with training. The first question is, what training is required to be a police officer? At what point are police officers trained to shoot a suspect? What part of the body do they aim at and why? The floor is yours.
I can take this one. So the post requirement to be a police officer in the state of Tennessee is 480 hours of training. However, at the Metro Nashville Police Training Academy, we receive over 1,000 hours of training before we graduate from the academy. Upon graduation, We continue our training with what we call our field training officers, and that's spending 6 months.
I think she froze up a little bit, so I'll pick up from where she was left off. Commander Kerrigan was saying that the training academy, after they complete their training at the police academy, they go out with a field training officer. Field training officer is an experienced officer who's been out in the field for quite some years and has interviewed for the position, and now has risen to the ability to train officers, and those officers get an additional 6 months in the field training, and that's over 1,000 hours training with the field supervisor.
Okay, thank you so much. And then to go back to the second portion of that question, when it comes to when a police officer may have to discharge their firearm, what training goes into that?
Well, I can start that off and other people can jump in, but the only time we're allowed to use deadly force is if we feel like there is a reasonable fear of death or serious bodily injury to ourselves or a third party. That's the only time we're allowed to use any type of deadly force. And we're responsible for if we were discharging our firearm, we're responsible for every round. So every round out of our service weapon. So any time we shoot it, we have to justify each time we would have to actually discharge our weapon to meet the criteria that we have reasonable belief that there is imminent death or serious bodily injury to ourselves or a third party. That's the only time we're allowed to use deadly force.
If I could jump in real quick and piggyback, it's really the same for citizens. Citizens don't have a duty to retreat, and the use of deadly force to protect themselves and to protect someone else is justified here in Tennessee. So it's really the same as citizens.
Thank you. So in kind of reviewing and prepping for this discussion for tonight, it's my understanding, I think you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, to if you have to discharge your weapon, it has to be the person's center of mass. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay. Now, some people may be curious as to know why we couldn't just, if there's a suspect who's fleeing or presents a danger, why not just shoot them in the arm or the leg?
So I think one, I can comment on that real quick, is the fear that it won't end the threat, that the threat is still there. So if you feel like your life is threatened, you have to end the threat. By shooting them in the arm or the leg, you're not really doing that. You're not ending the threat. And obviously you're still in danger.
Gotcha.
Also, if I could piggyback on it, also we're trained to shoot at the center mass only because that's a large part of the body as well. The large area of the body.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. The second question that we have for tonight is, how are police trained to de-escalate situations?
I can start that one. We have several hours of VDI, or what's called verbal defense and influence, 14 hours total that we have to take in the academy, and then several hours every year that we're police officers following that. We also do VDI reality-based training. So that's where they put us into a scenario in the academy in a controlled environment, and they work with us on how to de-escalate the situation. We do 4 hours of training on that. And then we also receive training in instant decision making. So basically, how will we process a problem and use all the skills and resources that we have to decide on how to deal with that situation. And we receive 2 hours of training in that.
And just to add to that, that incident decision-making model is posted around through our department at multiple precincts. That's one of the main things that officers have to use when out there dealing with multiple different incidents throughout the day when they're answering calls for service. But the incident decision-making model, it's at every precinct, posted throughout that precinct. But that's one thing that we get the hours of training on, because if you look at that model and you go through the steps, anytime you receive a call for service, once you receive that call for service and you're getting that information from the dispatcher and you're reading that on your computer, as far as the call text is what we call the information that you're receiving, you're supposed to go through that decision-making model and take it one step at a time as far as when you arrive on that call. And you're supposed to take all of the totality of the circumstances. Once you do that, you have to reevaluate the information and the incident itself and make sure that you're taking the right steps and proper steps to solve that issue.
I think it's also important to note that it's very much emphasized in our academy, our in-service training, throughout our policies and procedures about sanctity of life and how important the sanctity of life is. So whatever level of force we're using, whatever the situation is, de-escalation is always our prime motive in trying to handle a situation with the least amount of force and to de-escalate it verbally, because always in the backdrop, we always remain vigilant with the fact that the sanctity of life is the utmost importance for us.
And if I could piggyback on what Inspector Imhoff has said, like he said, that our main priority is to de-escalate the situation. It's very few that we want to respond to a call and escalate it. Our job is to de-escalate, to separate the parties, to get the information of what has taken place, and then to make a conscious decision on what we need to do to proceed further and to make sure that we don't have to respond back out there to the scene, depending on whatever type of call we're responding to.
Thank you so much. The next question that we have for tonight is, what are your thoughts in regards to mandatory body cams while on duty? And potentially, is this a controversial issue for police officers?
I'll lead that one off. I can tell you as a first line supervisor, it's been great for us because we'll get lots of complaints from citizens that officers have done something wrong. And it's great to investigate that and see most of the time, it's not just proven false that the officer didn't do anything wrong, but usually you can see the other side of the citizen. Sometimes they take it a little bit further than they need to. So for us, it's been great actually to investigate these complaints and see that your officers are doing right out there.
You know, I think it's a combination of a couple
Everybody,
things. I think it's a combination of a couple things where it helps citizens build trust within the police department. It's an accountability piece for the police department. But on the flip side, it helps police officers know that it's not just their word in situations. They can go back to the body cam footage and actually hear what transpired on a call for service or a traffic stop. What was the dialogue between the parties? So it's very much a good protective tool, not only for the officers and the citizens as well.
We also
And
use
I'll-
the body camera footage in the academy. So if there is an incident where officers go out and they do a fantastic job, then they will be able to submit that body camera footage to the academy to train future officers on how to handle each situation. Also controversial to that, if we do a bad job in a situation, we use that footage to learn from our mistakes, and that can also be presented to the academy for training.
Thank you so much. The next question is, because with this viewing being open to multiple people, multiple parents who are online thinking about the safety of their kids, one question that came up was, what advice would you give to your Black son, nephew, neighbor, etc., on how to deal with police officers in 2021?
I'll start that question off. So one thing, as far my son is, I have an 8-year-old son, so he's kind of young at this point in time. But I do have 3 brothers, and I have family here in Nashville. I'm from Nashville. One advice that I always give to my relatives or brothers or whatever the case is, it's no different than what I would tell anybody else as far as how to interact with the police. I always tell them, make sure that you're always respectful. If an officer pulls you over, or if an officer responds to a call for service at your residence or whatever the case may be, make sure that you're respectful to that officer. Make sure that you're compliant. Like if somebody pulls you over, asking you for a driver's license, make sure you're compliant with what they're asking you to do. Those are the 2 top things that I always tell people, and I wouldn't tell anybody anything different as far as how to interact with the police. Those are the top priorities, especially the respectful part. You know, if you're talking to an officer and you feel like that officer is mistreating you, or you feel like that some kind of racially motivated disrespect towards you, we have our Office of Professional Accountability. We have a Community Oversight Board. We have supervisors, as Sergeant Sofer talked about earlier. We have supervisors that are able to investigate complaints. In our Office of Professional Accountability, they look into misconduct, and also if you're not satisfied as far as the police, you can take any kind of officer misconduct to our Community Oversight Board, and they have a separate investigation that they actually conduct into that. But when it comes to, and I understand those concerns as far as, the question that is directly as far as what information you would give to Black sons, nephews, or Blacks dealing with police. I totally understand, and all of us as police officers, we know the things that we've seen in the last several years as far as police in Black communities and things like that. And I always say for myself specifically, I have a unique situation being a police officer and also being a Black man. Before I put my police uniform on and go to work every day, I'm a Black man before I put that on. So I'm always, I always say I'm in a unique situation because a lot of situations that go on, I can see from both perspectives. So I try to look at them and stay in a neutral situation as far as looking at it from a Black perspective and also looking at it from a police officer perspective. But as far as that direct question, as far as the advice that I always give, that's the main advice that I always give is when you're dealing with police, any police officer, just make sure you're respectful and compliant with what they're asking you to do in that situation.
To
I would
piggyback
just
off,
like,
go ahead.
I would just like to encourage also everyone. We hold a Citizens Police Academy at least once or twice a year. Obviously, probably did not do that during the height of COVID, but I think we are back to having that program. And I would just like to encourage everyone who would like to learn more about the police department overall and then individual units within the department to apply to go through that program. It's really beneficial.
They also have that, the Citizens Police Academy also had a graduation tonight with the Hispanic Police Academy, Citizens Police Academy. And I know in the past, I think COVID has played a role in this, but I know TSU had a program over there of a student Citizens Police Academy as well. I don't think we've done that for a little bit just due to COVID, but we've started doing those programs up again. And hopefully that comes back around as well.
To piggyback off of what Officer Bauer said, I would just say that the main thing is just making sure that we comply with what police officers say at any given incidents when we're encountering with the police officers. Like he said, if we feel that if the person feels that the police officer is being too aggressive or being inappropriate or doing anything that's wrong, we actually want to make it past that stop, and like we have things that's in place for them to make a complaint against the police officer. So getting the badge number and the name of the officer and then filing that complaint is the most safe thing to do. But going against what the police officer says or refusing or just not listening to them is not good for their safety or our safety. And our main thing and our main concern is their safety as well. So it's just complying with whatever they tell you to do. If you feel that it's not right, or if it's wrong, or if you have a disagreement with it, there's things in place that we can take to make sure that the officer is investigated of whatever the complaint it is.
Thank you so much. Our next question was, how has your job changed with the more visible profiles of movements like the Black Lives Matter? Or whoever likes it.
Not necessarily contributing to the BLM movement, but in recent years with the President's Task Force Against Policing, as well as Davidson County's Mayor's Task Force for Policing, we have seen a lot of changes within the department. We've gone from a CompStat model of policing to a precision-based policing model. And what that means is instead of looking at the numbers each week and looking at this hotspot of where our crime is occurring, we're actually taking those crime numbers and going, okay, well, what's the cause of this? Why are we having this crime in this area? And we're looking at specific people within that area that are causing the crime. We've also got other resources now called social network analysis, which allows us to break apart that enterprise, so to speak, of the crime, whether that's gang related, whether that's drug related. That's just the easiest for me to think about it. And look at all the parts of that criminal enterprise and try to, if they have outstanding warrants, go ahead and get them in custody for warrants and break apart that network. We also have focused a lot on rebuilding relationships with communities that have previously felt over-policed because of the CompStat model or hotspot model, where we used to just send all our resources to those areas. And we have something called our community engagement teams, where we have specific teams of officers focused in those areas where we know we've had issues, where the community has felt like we were over policing them. And they actually are there to build that community back up and try to create this environment where they understand that we're there to support them, that we are trying to address those crime numbers, and that we're the neighborhood police officers, because a lot of those communities do want that neighborhood officer that, you might have seen on 50s TV shows or 60s TV shows, that everyone knows who you're talking to. We also try to have events, at least in East Precinct. We've done a pretty good job at that. We have multiple events where we're inviting the community out to see what we're about and what we do, and also trying to get to know them. This year alone, we've had multiple trunk or treat events. We've had touch a truck. We've also done, we're about to have an apartment managers meeting. We had our Faith in Blue event where we worked with churches in the area to put on a nice day where we could come out and have a festival fair environment and get to know the community better.
I think a couple other things to think about is, since Chief Drake took office as the chief of police, which I think officially is about 1 year, where they lifted the interim chief tag and he became the official chief of police. He started the Office of Community Outreach and Partnership, led by Commander Carlos Lara, which is a group of officers and supervisors that their job primarily is to go out and make connections and build relationships with people from marginalized communities, whether that's urban communities, or whether that's out in South Nashville with Hispanic communities, or the Kurdish communities, or Laotian communities. Just try to build relationships with folks and let them know more about our department. And that's one of the things I would encourage anybody that's listening to this tonight is learn about your police department in Nashville. Learn about what we do. Learn about our policies and procedures. There's an accreditation organization called CALEA that goes out and checks on departments and evaluates departments and evaluates whether they're encompassing or utilizing best practices. And we have been a gold star standard police department for several years now. Doesn't mean we're not without areas in which we can grow, just like we've been saying with these new offices, as Sergeant Ware alluded to. But I think it's important not to always look at every national narrative about police departments as a whole. I think and I encourage every group that I talk to, please learn about wherever you're located at, whatever city you're in. Please learn about your police department and what your police department does and what they don't do well, what they do well, what they don't do well, and try to change those things in every organization. I think it's important to note that. And I do know that all these community engagement teams, one of the efforts they've done too, like for East, for example, they've done the community engagement team over there. They've had Walk with a Cop program where they walk kids to school every day, and that's really helped the truancy. So those are just examples of some of the programs that we've done to try to improve that. Doesn't mean that there's not room for more improvement. But I think a lot of the VML movement has, made a lot of departments across the country look at, hey, what are we doing to reach out, to build relationships, to build that partnerships with communities about how we can best serve. And I think part of that too was the 21st century policing report during the Obama administration saying that we need to transfer from a warrior mentality into a guardian mentality. And if you look at our police cars on the side, it's Nashville's Guardians. Because I think one of the goals that we have is it's not a us versus you, it's a us together to try to build the best community we can, and to look at those small minority of people that are causing problems and identify those, and to address those individuals as opposed to address a community that might be causing problems.
Thank you so much. We do have our first question from the live viewing audience. The question was, what is the criteria for the Citizens Police Academy?
I think you have to be a Davidson County resident. I think you just have to be a Davidson County resident over 18 years of age. I'm not sure about any criteria in regards to any criminal history. But what we can do when we get off this call, we can send you the information about the criteria when the next class comes up, how to apply for that.
Yes, that would be great. Thank you. Our next question is, I'm sorry, Detective Whiteley, did you want to say something?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, okay, sorry. The question was, what are the penalties for drug possession and assault and battery? For instance, why is there a difference in sentencing for the use of cocaine versus crack?
I'll take a stab at this first, and then everybody else can jump in. One of the things that's important to realize that we do not make law. The police departments do not create law. We just enforce the law. So once we bring cases based on probable cause and evidence and witness statements, then it's up to the district attorney's office, public defender, defense attorneys, juries, and judges to make the determination, and lawmakers of how these cases go. I mean, lawmakers made those laws, and I think it's, as far as the crack versus cocaine, I mean, a lot of that came in the late 80s, mid 80s, early 90s, because there was such a crack epidemic at that time. I think there's been some unforeseen consequences because of those laws that lawmakers put into place. And some of the legislation that came out of the Clinton era back in the early 90s, when the crack epidemic hit. There was a lot of violence at that time. The crime rate was extremely high. So this is what their remedy was. And like I said, I think there were some unforeseen consequences from some of those laws. And a lot of it hit lower socioeconomic areas harder than others, such as has been enhanced penalties for meth. And some of that's hit a lot of rural areas as opposed to cocaine as well. So a lot of it has really affected the lower socioeconomic folks, whether it's in rural America or inner city America. But I think that's where it first came from. But it's important to note that, when laws are enacted, the best place to get those laws changed is through your, congressmen, state legislatures.
Thank you. We also have a second question from our live audience. The question is, what part of Nashville seems to have the most crime, domestic violence, and gangs? And what steps are being made to help this? And what is expected of citizens in those areas?
I'll start on the topic of domestic violence. Domestic violence it knows no boundaries. It has no parameters. It affects all types of people. So we experience domestic violence crimes all across our city. We have a very robust domestic violence division. that's staffed with over 20-something detectives that really do their best to prosecute these cases. And then our patrol officers who are battling domestic violence on the front lines, when they respond and there is evidence that a domestic violence crime has taken place, then they have to take action and make an arrest on the primary aggressor in that event in order to ensure the safety of the person that has experienced the victim of the crime, and then in order to hold that suspect accountable. So I just want to, add that there is no part of the county that domestic violence doesn't touch, unfortunately.
I think another part of that question, if I heard it right, was where the most crimes were. I can tell you that the busiest precinct we have, and this just come from working out there for 4 years, South has got the most calls for service. And it's just population wise, it's very dense out there, a lot of people out there. So just everything is more out that way. I don't know if that answers the question or not, but South is going to be our busiest precinct.
And I think we have 8 precincts that cover Nashville. I think every precinct has their own unique challenges. Each precinct has their own unique crime challenges they have to deal with. Some has higher rates of a certain crime as opposed to another crime. That's one of the things about what's the job of each commander is kind of, identify what are the issues they're having in their communities and their precincts, and utilize the resources to address the specific problems in that specific precinct. And that's where our precision policing policy comes from, is where we look at what are the problems in that area, identify the people that are causing those issues, come up with strategies to identify those and address them.
To piggyback off of Inspector Imhoff, compared to some of the data and some of the stories that's been done, of course, as we all know, that North Nashville is one of the areas that is known to have the most or the more violent crimes that goes on. And it may be true, but the thing about it is that when we go back to it, we can't police without the community. So the thing about it is just whether it's in North, East, South Nashville, we need the community to be involved because they actually live there. As we don't live there, we go home at the end of the night, but we can't do our job without them. So the more that they call in and report certain things to us and let us know what's actually going on there, the better that it will be. Because like I said, they're there more than we're actually, present out there. So them just calling in, if they want to stay anonymous or be confidential, that's fine. But just kind of calling the 862-8600 number or the 911 number if it's an emergency, and just allowing us to come out there and actually investigate whatever is going on. But being from North Nashville, I know that is the area where a lot of crimes go unreported, especially domestic violence or different assaults. So basically it's just getting the community on board with actually calling in, and if they want to remain anonymous, they can do that. You don't have to actually give your name, your number, or your address. We don't have to come talk to you. But if we don't know what's going on out there, then we were not able to actually intervene and resolve the issues.
Thank you.
And also for individuals, crimemapping.com is a phenomenal tool. If someone wants to set up an alert for their household, they can actually set up a radius around their house and will be alerted to any crime that's reported in that area.
Thank you. The next question we have is, what crimes do you hate having to arrest or cite people on? And conversely, what crimes do you feel are underreported?
I'm not really sure how you would answer what crimes we hate having to arrest someone for. I think, officers have a wide array of discretion on cases. Outside of a lot of domestic violence cases, not a lot of discretion there if you have probable cause to make an arrest. state law is the preferred response is to make an arrest. So, I mean, as far as what, I mean, every individual officer is different. I think we try to apply the law equally and fairly. It's kind of like on a traffic stop. Do we have to give you a ticket? No, we don't have to give you a ticket. Can we give you a warning? Absolutely, we can give you a warning. So it's up to officer discretion. So I don't know if there's any particular crime that people don't want to enforce. I think that's a little bit subjective, and every officer is going to have a different take on that. What was the second part?
And conversely, what crimes do you feel are underreported?
Oh, I think and other people on this call know this much better than I because they've worked in those areas specifically, but domestic violence and sex crimes. You know, I worked in sex crimes for a long time as a detective, and absolutely that is a very, very underreported crime as well as domestic violence.
And another crime that goes unreported. I was a precinct detective sergeant over in investigations for 3.5 years. But one of the things that we noticed that goes unreported a lot is a lot of robberies. Street robberies go unreported, especially if they're drug related, where one party may wait several weeks, several days to make a report because they didn't necessarily want to call the police. So I noticed a lot of unreported robberies going on. And then also in Hispanic communities, also we had a lot of Hispanic families that would call in or that we would find out after making contact in several apartment complex areas in the Midtown area, the footprint that it covers. But a lot of street robberies or home invasions will go unreported. So just to add on to that, domestic violence that goes unreported and also sexual assaults, but street robberies go unreported a lot of the times.
And I think that really ties into some of the things we talked about earlier. Some of the community trust we're trying to build, the relationships we're trying to build, reaching out to maybe some of those marginalized communities that we talked about earlier. Because if you don't trust the police department and you don't think we're going to do a good job of investigating, working on your case, why would you call us, right? So I think as we build those relationships, build trust, our hope is that we get more people calling us, not only with the crimes that happen, with and just information about those crimes, tips of those crimes. So I think those are all interrelated.
Okay, thank you. Next question we have is, what do TVs and movies get wrong about police work?
I'll jump on this one quickly. A lot of times I would say that a lot of the TV shows and movies, they get a ton of things incorrect about our work. A lot of times people, I've been on the department for 12 years, but I've gotten so many questions from people, especially in being in investigations. So many people ask, why can't y'all do it like we see on TV? People literally ask that question sometimes, but some of the things that clearly wrong, like if you watch, all of the different crime shows that they show on TV, they can have a case, a homicide case, or a string of sexual assaults or sex crimes. They can have that stuff solved in 30 minutes or an hour. In reality, those things take, a lot of time, and it takes a lot of hours to work those cases and to prosecute them and get convictions on them. So a lot of times there's a big stereotype of police work based on TV shows. You might also see another thing where I know a lot of people have seen like Bad Boys with Martin Lawrence and Will Smith, where they shoot up the place. They just if the bad guys are running away, then they just they're shooting. But we have policy and laws that obviously we have to follow, and that's not reality. But a lot of people think the stuff that they see on TV shows, that's the way it's done, but it's not. Even on shows like First 48, some of that stuff is very legit that you see them do, but also it's also structured for TV too. So so a lot of the stuff that you see on TV shows and movies, they get a lot of our work incorrectly.
So one part of that, this just happened to me where I couldn't even finish the movie, is the shootouts he's talking about. So it's this misperception that we're getting to these shootouts all the time, that every officer is involved in a shootout. And if I can point out, most of us on this department are going to go through our whole career and never be involved in a shootout, in a shooting. But sometimes that's the part for me that they portray on TV that is far, far from the truth.
I would say some of the frustrating stuff also is with technology. They, on TV, you can portray that, hey, if there's a camera, you're going to get the most perfect picture of the suspect every single time. And you can zoom in, 100 times magnification to get a license plate off a car, or get you can see everything. That's just not the case. I mean, a lot of times with a lot of the photographs that we get, or camera footage that we get, the more you zoom in, the more pixelated it gets. So you can't really tell all that much. And you can't just use your hands and make it larger and see everything just perfectly. And you can't get a fingerprint off a rock, or just every little thing that you see, and all of a sudden, they make it sound like on a lot of TV shows, detectives are just looking at pictures of a crime scene and eureka, they figure it out and they go off and solve the case, where it takes a lot of community effort, a lot of people calling. We can't solve these cases by ourselves. It takes people calling us, communicating with us, working together as a community to solve these cases. And, the one thing that's also frustrating is how that police officer on TV or movies is glorified for solving the case, but going outside the lines, or, breaking the rules throughout. And of course, I'm thinking of all those old 80s movies and 90s movies with Stallone and all that, where they're blowing up buildings, doing whatever. There's no accountability. There's no consequences, when none of that's true.
One thing that I would say that the TV and the media get wrong is how they portray police officers, as far as they give you only a piece of certain incidents of what's taking place, instead of the full totality or the full video. They show you like that good, interesting, or juicy part of something, instead of showing you from the beginning to the end, instead of just showing you the middle. So I know that it's a touchy topic, but a lot of TV, a lot of media shows officers shooting Black people or killing Black people. And I think that we got to look at the totality of the situation, what has happened from the beginning and to the end, like what has led up to certain things that's happening. As we all know that an action calls for a reaction. So I think that that's one of the things that the TV definitely get wrong and portray out to the community and to society, and that it makes it hard also for other police officers to come back behind. And it also makes it hard for community to trust the police, because they think that we're there to hurt or harm them, when we're actually there to help them.
Okay, thank you. One last question is, what do civilians need to know about new laws regarding open care in the state of Tennessee? Whoever would like to answer that question.
I'll take it. We are an open carry state now, and what that means, as long as you are not prohibited to carry a firearm by other means, what that would be convicted of a felony, convicted of a domestic violence incident or something like that, then you can legally carry a firearm. What is aside of that is that any privately owned business can deny services to anyone for that. So just because you're legally allowed to carry a firearm doesn't mean that you can legally go into the Opry Mills Mall, which I know has a no firearms policy, with a gun.
Thank you. We have one additional question from the live audience, and the question is, what are the rules for making a citizen's arrest? Whoever would like to answer.
I think people have a right to call us. We encourage people to call us and be a witness We don't encourage people to jump in the middle of situations. We want you to reach out, call us, give good descriptions. We do never encourage somebody to get actively involved, put themselves or their loved ones or their friends or families at risk. Get license plate numbers, get good descriptions, call us, let us know who we need to go look for. But we really discourage people going hands-on and trying to stop, because we just don't want to see folks get hurt for the most part.
We are getting close to the conclusion of tonight's topic, so I think I'll just ask one or two additional questions. How should civilians handle someone who is loitering on their property, in particular for a lot of our people who are viewing their church property?
Sergeant Ware, why don't you jump in, since you work so much with the community with the trespass waivers and things like that?
Sure, absolutely. So the first thing we would encourage any business to do, or private citizen, is to get a trespass waiver for their property. What that's going to do is it's going to allow the police department to prosecute on your behalf for anyone on your property not for a lawful purpose. It does get a little interesting with churches. And the reason I say that is because part of the church's mission is outreach, right? Y'all want people to come in and y'all want to minister to people. So a lot of times what happens with that, when churches do get a trespass waiver, you're talking to the officers in your area, and you're talking to the community affairs coordinator at your precinct and saying, this is what we're looking for. This is what we outside of business hours, or I don't want people just hanging out and sleeping under my awning or something like that. Whereas during business hours, you are doing that outreach and you're able to minister to those people. If you have someone on your property during business hours that you do not want there for whatever reason, they're causing a problem, they're just not leaving after you've asked them to, or something like that, please feel free to call the non-emergency number, the 862-8600 in Davidson County, and we will come out and ask them to leave. If they still refuse to leave, that's when we're going to use that trespass waiver in order to take them downtown and go ahead and arrest them without you having to leave your business and sign that warrant yourself.
Okay, thank you. Did anyone else have a follow-up to that? Okay. So Alex, the last question for tonight, for each of the panelists, what words of advice or wisdom would you like to give the community as we conclude our wonderful discussion for tonight?
I think one of the things I've always told folks is just get engaged, get involved, find out where your community meetings are for your neighborhood. Go to those meetings, learn about your efforts that your particular precinct, wherever that precinct may be, what are they doing regarding not only crime, but just issues. And a lot of times your community meetings and your neighborhood associations, there's usually going to be the representative for the Metro Council there as well. I think the important part is to be an active, engaged citizen, know what's going on in your community, know what your public officials are doing in your community, know your police department, find out who your community coordinator is, who your precinct commander is, be engaged in those meetings, find out what's going on, get to know as far as get involved, like we said earlier, go to the Citizens Police Academy. That's a great behind the scenes look at what your police department here in Nashville is doing. That's what I would encourage folks to do. Find out the facts as far as crime in your area, as opposed to just hearing what the neighbor had to say or what somebody else down the street had to say. That's one of the things that's great about going to these neighborhood association meetings is that you're going to have representatives from that precinct come there and talk about this is stuff going on in your community. These are crimes happening in your neighborhoods. And this is what you can do to help.
I'd like to go just one step further on that too. And this is regards to what Detective Ward was talking about earlier, just with media and things that come out on social media and stuff is just seek the truth. Try to learn the truth of whatever incident you found out about. and dig for the truth before you make a decision how you want to react to that. Let's look for the truth of what's happening out there. That's what we're doing. We're looking for the truth of any incident that we go to. And I think citizens should do the same.
And I just like to reiterate that, and we've said this, more than once during the course of this meeting tonight, is that we can't be successful. The police department cannot be successful without the help from citizens. And I think Detective Ward can give a unique perspective on this, as she works very hard to investigate crimes that occur in East Nashville. But oftentimes her efforts are stymied when she can't get victims to help her or witnesses to help her. And so in order to make Nashville safer, we all have to come together and work together to hold those few accountable that are causing problems within our city.
To piggyback off of Commander Kerrigan, I would just say that we all have a role to play in order for us to be a union and to be one. The police department cannot do our job without the community. I can't stress that enough. So like I said, when you see your officers, get to know them, stop and talk to them. We're more than happy to talk to you, answer any questions. Like Inspector Imhoff said, go to your community meetings, visit the precincts. We're open to getting to know you and welcoming you in, answering any questions that you may have. We love to attend any events that you may have, talking to your youth, talking to your kids, coming to the church, talking to, the congregation or schools. We love to be involved because, like I said, at the end of the day, we cannot do our job without you all. You all live in the community. We care about the community in Nashville, the area that we do serve. And we do want to be able to make the area a better, safe community for you all. But not only that, we want you all to get to know us as the persons that we are, because at the end of the day, we're still human and we don't want you to be afraid of us or scared. So I would just say, like Inspector Imhoff said, it's just getting involved and engaging with us. Because we'll be more than welcome to welcome you in.
And I would just say too, I would encourage the community to work together with the police department. It's been said numerous times that we can only do our jobs. A lot of people don't realize how important the community is for us to be effective doing our job. So in order to build those bridges and the partnerships and all that, we have to work together. So I would just say, try to work together with the police departments and the community and everything that goes into that, but just working together. But that teamwork makes that dream work. And I know we hear that all the time, but if we can work together and come together, that's the only way we're going to be able to build those bridges.
And on that coming together, I would just encourage neighbors to get to know each other. We live in a society today where neighbors don't even talk to each other sometimes. And I think that in itself is an issue. I can definitely remember some loud noise calls where I'm like, have you talked to your neighbor? Do they know that's loud? And they'll go and speak to their neighbor afterwards. Man, thank you for that advice. That was fantastic, because they're really nice people, and B, they turned down that loud noise and I haven't had to hear their radio again. So just creating a society where it's fantastic and so important.
I think Sergeant Ware brings up an excellent point. And I heard this a few years ago when I was at a community meeting where someone was encouraged, so I can't take credit for this. So people spend so much money and time on their back porches, where we spend a little bit more time on our front porches, outside of our privacy fences and enclosed back porches, that maybe we all start sitting on that front porch again. We actually get to know our neighbors and personalize them and humanize them and get to know each other a little bit better. So great point by Sergeant Ware.
Thank you so much for all of our panelists for tonight. Let's give them a nice round of applause. Thanking them for taking time out of their busy schedule to come talk to us. so we can get a better understanding as civilians, how we can help our police officers and vice versa. I want to thank again our panelists, Inspector Imhoff, Commander Cardigan, Lieutenant Bowers, Sergeant Ware, Sergeant Sophia, and then Detective Ward Whiteley. Also want to thank those who tuned in to our program tonight. If you missed any portion of that, that will be available on our YouTube channel, Facebook, and also on our church website as well. Also want to thank our bishop and our Grace Apostolic Church family for their support in helping us put this program together and all their kind and all their efforts to help make this program successful. Also want to be one who encourages all of us to be supportive of one another and to pray for one another, pray for our police officers who are out there sacrificing to do the best job that they possibly can, realizing that it's not an easy job because they're in the public eye. So they're open to a lot of criticism and have to make a lot of decisions in a split second. So we also want to pray for those who are out there making that sacrifice as police officers. Thank you once again for tuning in tonight. Be blessed and have a safe and happy Thanksgiving. Thank you.